As you may already know, bees play a vital role in our ecosystem. Without them, agriculture as we know it would cease to exist. That's why it concerns all of us that all over the world, bees are mysteriously disappearing. It's possible that in a generation or two, bees could become a thing of the past. Bee Taxidermy, a how-to guide. Using the methods outlined in this video, you can prepare for a world without bees. By watching this video, you'll learn the basic skills involved in bee taxidermy, a process that repairs and preserves found dead bees. Using these methods, you can create an heirloom quality taxidermy bee for your family to enjoy for generations to come. The first step in repairing a dead bee is finding one. Be patient. As bees become more scarce, their bodies will become harder to find. To start, look for places that you think are particularly hazardous to bees. Once you find a bee, you'll want to take down some information about it. This information could be valuable in solving the mystery of bee disappearance. Hang on to it and store it in a safe place. Here are a couple of questions you might consider to get started. Where did you find the bee? How do you think it died? Now that you've found your bee and taken down its information, you can begin the process of bee taxidermy. You will need wire, superglue, non-toxic glue in a nozzled container, scissors, pliers, rubbing alcohol, cotton wool, a clean reused jar, a block of styrofoam, a needle. You may also at this point start collecting a selection of small discarded materials to use as bee parts. Some examples: scrap metal, computer parts, reused bee parts. Your next step is to soak your bee in alcohol for at least 1 week. This will get rid of any unwanted mold or bacteria. This way, your bee will not rot. You can purchase a good rubbing alcohol for this in the first aid section of your local drugstore. Store your bee in a cool, dry place out of direct sunlight for at least 1 week. You may want to check on it every now and again to make sure it is completely submerged. Mark when you started to soak your bee on your calendar. Once a week has passed, you can remove the bee from the alcohol. Now that you have removed the bee from the alcohol, it is important to pin it so that it will dry properly. Take a pin and firmly but gently push it through the thorax of the bee. You may hear a loud crunching sound. This is normal. Now that the bee has been pinned, it will need to be left to dry for another week, just to be sure it has dried, inside and out. Now that your bee is dry, your next step is to separate the thorax from the abdomen. I use a small pair of nail scissors for this. Place the scissors carefully between the thorax and the abdomen and snip. Next, cut a 6-inch section of wire and using tweezers or your fingers, grasp the abdomen of the bee. Be careful as you do this not to break the bee's abdomen. Now, thread the wire through the abdomen. Take your non-toxic glue and put one end of the wire into the nozzle. Press the tip of the hole in the abdomen and gently squeeze the bottle until you see a small amount of glue coming out of the stinger end. After applying a generous amount of superglue to the wire, gently push the thorax and abdomen sections together. The glue will need to be left to dry for about 20 minutes. While you're waiting, you can build another part for the bee. Take a section of fine wire, about 6 inches long. Tightly coil one end of the wire around your needle. Make about 6 coils. Push the coils tightly together with your fingernail and remove the wire from the needle. Now, turn the wire around and do the same thing to the other end. Now you've made a set of antennae. Next, place a small amount of superglue between the eyes of your bee. Place the center of the coiled wire on the glue. Hold in place for 15 seconds. Now, leave it to dry 20 minutes. Depending on the condition of your bee, you may want to replace a wing or two. I always begin by removing any existing wings and gluing them back onto the bee in a more animated pose. This bee is missing a wing, so I've decided to reconstruct a new one out of wire and an old newspaper. You'll start by taking a section of wire about 6 inches long. Then, bend it into a wing shape, based on the size and shape of the bee's remaining wings. Take a piece of newspaper, about 2 inches by 2 inches. Coat one side of it with non-toxic glue and fold it around the wire frame you've made. Hold it in place until it sticks on its own. Next, trim the excess newspaper from your wing and trim the wire end to about 1/4 inches. While this dries, you'll need to prepare your bee's thorax for the wing. Take your needle and gently poke a hole where you want the wing to go. Now, put a generous amount of superglue on or inside the hole you just made, and gently place your wing inside the hole. Hold in place for 15 seconds. Leave to dry. The next step in the taxidermy process will be to repair or replace the bee's legs as needed. The first step in this is to set the bee's legs. The legs may have curled up unattractively when it died. Setting the legs involves forcibly placing them in a more pleasing pose. Bee legs are very delicate. It's a good idea to reinforce your bee's leg joints with superglue. Take extra care to put a generous amount of glue on both sides of the joint. Next, I'll build replacement legs out of some resistors from a motherboard. Once I find some that I think will work well, I'll start by winding some fine copper wire around the tip of 2 similar resistors, leaving at least 1/2 inch of slack between them. These will form the top 2 joints on your bee's new legs. This is what your legs should look like at this stage. I've made 2 sets since 4 of this bee's 6 legs needed to be replaced. Next, turn the bee upside down and apply a generous amount of superglue onto the thorax. I'm placing the 2 inches of slack from my set of constructed legs onto the glue and holding them in place for 15 seconds. Now that we've replaced the legs, antennae, and wings, the bee is almost finished. You want your bee to look its best. For final touches, take a small brush and some black ink and paint over any glue spots that remain. Congratulations! You have just completed your first taxidermy bee. For advice on repairing bees, to post photos of your bees, or just to keep in touch with other bee taxidermists, join May I Have Your Bees Please on Facebook.